the US Treasury Secretary continues to restore investor faith in the US banking system. She says that the federal emergency actions to back up cash-strapped banks like SVB and Signature Bank could be deployed again in future if required. The message comes amid flaring market concerns over small and mid-sized regional banks that are currently experiencing a surge of deposits in the wake of the SVB collapse.
And despite the global uncertainty and volatility, the Bank of England joined the Fed in hiking rates. The UK's central bank raised benchmark interest rates to 4.25% from the earlier 4%. Now, it also went on to say that signs of inflation is still persisting and that could mean more hikes in the offing. Now, commenting on the recent banking turmoil, it said that the UK's banking system remains resilient.
Well, and central banks across the globe continue on their rate hike spree despite current volatility and uncertainty stemming from the banking turmoil in the United States. Following suit post the Fed and the BOE rate hike, the Swiss National Bank has hiked its policy rate by 50 basis points. This is the fourth consecutive hike and it's in line with what economists were expecting.
And shares of Jack Dorsey-led payments company Block plunged as much as 15% after Hindenburg held short positions in the company, alleging that company overstated its user accounts and understated its customer acquisition costs. Now, in its report, Hindenburg describes Block's internal systems as a Wild West approach to compliance.
Well, I will stick to Switzerland, and in the latest on Credit Suisse, the Swiss regulator has gone ahead in its decision to instruct Credit Suisse to write down its AT1 bonds. The regulator has instructed Credit Suisse to write down $17 billion worth of bonds. That's a large quantum, probably the largest ever write-off. The regulator said that that Credit Suisse received from the Swiss National Bank, the loan that it received last week was backed by the federal government and meant the conditions for a write-down had been met.
And on the latest development of the TikTok saga in the US, company CEO Shao-Zi Chu was grilled by lawmakers from both parties on whether the Chinese-owned app can protest American privacy, as well as whether data from US users could end up in the hands of the Chinese government, which Chu repeatedly denied. He argued, saying that the platform was doing everything to ensure safety for its 150 million American users.
Well, and the Russian official Dmitry Medvedev warns that if Russian President Vladimir Putin gets arrested overseas, it would mean a declaration of war against Russia. The assertion by the Russian diplomat comes weeks after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against the Russian president over the alleged war crimes he committed in the midst of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war.
And nationwide protests entered their 9th day in France. Police fired tear gas and fought with violent black-clad anarchists as hundreds of thousands of protesters marched against the President Macron's plan to raise the pension age. Though the demonstrations in central Paris was generally peaceful, groups of black bloc anarchists smashed shop windows, demolished street furniture. Clashes ensued as riot police drove back the anarchists with tear gas and stun grenades.
Well, and amidst the doom and gloom, there's finally some good news for those laid off. You can now apply and appear for job interviews on a tourist visa. What will this mean for non-immigrant workers? Take a look.
Now, the global tech and startup industry is witnessing a stream of layoffs. Tech giants like Google and Microsoft and Meta and Amazon, they've all laid off thousands of employees. And amidst all this gloom and doom, there's finally some good news coming in. The United States has announced that individuals traveling to the United States on a B1 or a B2 visa can now apply for new jobs and even appear for job interviews. They're often called the B visas. They're the most common types of visa that are issued by the United States. While the B1 visa is issued mainly for short-term business trips, The B2 visa is issued mainly for tourism. And now, in a series of tweets that we've been reading, the US Citizenship and Immigration Services, or like it's called the USCIS, says that when non-immigrant workers are laid off, they wrongly assume that they may have no option but to leave the country within 60 days. This move comes at a time when a large number of foreign-born workers, including Indians, have been laid off by tech giants and startups alike. Now, when a non-immigrant worker's employment is terminated, they get a 60-day grace period that starts a day after the termination happens. And during this grace period, a non-immigrant worker can take several actions to remain in the United States. These actions include filing an application for a change of non-immigrant status or an application for the adjustment of status, among others. But if no action is taken, the worker and his dependents are required to leave the United States within 60 days. So this decision by the USCIS comes a month after two Indian American organizations have launched an online petition urging President Biden to extend the grace period of H-1B visas from 2 months to a year. Meanwhile, in an interesting development, more than 1,400 employees at Google have written an open letter to Google CEO Sundar Pichai. That open letter has called for better treatment of staff during the layoff process. The employees have also listed a series of demands, and those include freezing new hiring, priority to laid-off workers for job vacancies, and extra support to those at risk of losing their visa-linked residency along with their jobs.